Let's begin this live broadcast now by telling you the latest about the rising tensions between the US and China. Tensions are at an all-time high between the United States and China as of now, and both countries stood firm with high-level talks taking place in Hawaii. The United States is now pressing China over two main issues: its treatment of the Uighur Muslims and China eroding the autonomy of Hong Kong. This comes as the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with senior Chinese officials at a military base in Hawaii. This is the highest level meeting between the countries since the coronavirus pandemic broke out. According to the US State Department, Pompeo stressed on the need for fully reciprocal dealings between the two nations across commercial, security and diplomatic interactions. He also stressed the need for full transparency and information sharing to combat the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak and to prevent future outbreaks. But just as Mike Pompeo met with Chinese officials, the US president signed an act cracking down on China over its treatment of the Uighur Muslims. The bill now imposes sanctions on Chinese officials involved in the detention of Uighur Muslims. The bill is intended to send China a strong message on human rights. China has hit back at these sanctions, calling it a malicious attack on the country. In a statement by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, China said, and I quote, "We again urge the US side to immediately correct its mistakes and stop using this Xinjiang-related law to harm China's interests and interfere in China's internal affairs. Otherwise, China will resolutely take countermeasures and all the consequences arising must be fully borne by the United States." And not just that, Mike Pompeo and his G7 counterparts have now issued a strong statement against Hong Kong's controversial security law imposed by China. The G7 statement voices grave concerns about this law that prohibits subversion and other perceived offences in the financial hub of Hong Kong. The joint statement by Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy and Japan and the United States strongly urged the government of China to reconsider this decision. But Beijing has made it clear that it will continue to push ahead with this law. The Foreign Ministry has said that Beijing's determination to introduce the law was unwavering. China also denounced the statement by the G7 foreign ministers. We are now being joined by Einar Tangen, a political and economic commentator live from Beijing, for more insights on this story. Einar, thanks so much for joining us. So now the US president has signed into law an act which puts sanctions against Chinese officials over the mass detention of Uyghur Muslims in China. Can you give us some more insights into what these sanctions entail?
Trian, this is an act that was passed by Congress that gives the president, in this case Donald Trump, the ability, based on reports by four different parts of the U.S. government, including the State Department and the Director of National Security and the FBI. And basically what it's saying is if they find that there has been negative instances of Chinese use of power against Uyghurs, that the president is entitled to make sanctions as far as going as against individuals. And as part of this act, one of the people on the Politburo has been targeted for this. So this really represents a ratcheting up, and you have to see it in the context of the O'Donnell and Associates Big Book Coronavirus strategy that was put out in April that says attack China, attack China, attack China, don't defend the U.S. And also, you know, this meeting with the two heads of the Foreign Service. Very clearly, Pompeo, according to sources, was preparing the Chinese for the fact that there's going to be more attacks against China. And I think he was trying to send a word that perhaps not to take it too seriously, that this is just about election politics.
Now, this legislation seems to be a very significant action taken by any country so far to punish China over its treatment of ethnic minorities. So how has China reacted? We know it's a very strongly worded reaction from the country. And what does this really mean for the future of US-China relationship, which are already pretty tense?
Well, they're already in a tailspin. It puts China in the same area as Russia, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, etc. It's kind of one step above the tariffs that have been imposed unilaterally by the U.S. against its neighbors, India, EU, etc. So it continues to be a situation where China says this is a red line. It's not going to really matter in the broad scheme of things. Donald Trump will continue to use this as an election issue, and it's unclear how the Chinese will react to it. Probably there will be some tit-for-tat sanctions.
Right. Another question, what do we know about these detention centers in Xinjiang and the treatment levied to the Uyghur Muslims over there?
Okay, so there's a different perception about it. The Chinese would say that they're trying to provide education for people who dropped, in essence, do not have a command of the Chinese language, nor do they know how to read or write or have any kind of saleable skill. So they say that these were re-education camps where they were trying to help people and prevent a public security threat represented by people who are, in essence, underclasses being recruited by those who are preaching terrorism.
Right. Now, China currently is facing plenty of global criticism over its handling of the outbreak. There is a fresh cluster in Beijing as we speak. There is obviously rising tension at the border with India. What is the reaction of the president, Xi Jinping?
She has not made an official statement at this time. I mean, they're acting through the protocols that they've had. I live here in Beijing, and I've seen firsthand exactly what they're doing, taking a very cautious approach. They are testing everybody. They've had hundreds of thousands of tests just a few days. I mean, China has demonstrated an incredible ability, 11 million people in 14 days in Wuhan, when they wanted to really kind of stamp out and know exactly where the virus was. They'll continue to use those strategies in order to control this epidemic. So I think this narrative that they're under pressure because of COVID-19 is less real. They are under pressure in terms of the economic consequences, especially what's happening in the rest of the world. There's concerns about how it's being handled elsewhere and whether that will have repercussions economically and health-wise for China.
All right, Aina, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for all your inputs on this story.
Thank you.